Sawabona family, 1 week removed from the 2026 Equity Institute, we're back live. The often imitated, never duplicated, critically conscious classroom. I am one of your hosts, your co-host, Anthony Robinson, ACSA Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, here with the amazing Dr. Tracie Noriega, our amazing Senior Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Professional Learning Services. Tracie, last week was a time, it was popping, it was amazing. We had over 120 souls in the building. We heard from some great people. How are you feeling 1 week removed from our institute last week?
Anthony, it was a time to be had. And if you are all on LinkedIn, you might have seen some of the videos that a number of us put up. But if you were not there, you missed it. You missed out because for real, it was popping in so many ways from our keynote speakers who we're going to talk to today to our student panel. They were fire. So shout out to the San Leandro High School Social Justice Academy and their badass teachers. I mean, talk about leaders and the future of our country. I that is where my hope is. Because if we can ensure that all of our kids get an education like that, with that critical consciousness at what, 16, 17, about to be 18, going on. I mean, it's going to be unreal. I can't wait to see those scholars in the next few years and where they end up. But
Abs-
I was pretty exhausted, but I'm ready for this because we got Dr. we got Dr. Yolanda Sealey-Ruiz here with us today, and
Yes.
welcome to the Critically Conscious Classroom. I know when we met to prepare for your keynote, I was like, can I fangirl for a sec? And I'm still super fangirling because your work, when in ethnic studies, when we talk about self, when we start with self, when we talk about identity, in leadership development, teacher development, which we're going to talk about too, this idea of like race identity development and then racial identity development is so, so huge. So I can't wait to talk to you about that today.
I'm excited. Can I just say a credible shout out to the two of you? My gosh. And I was telling you before we started the show that this podcast is an inspiration for me. So thank you each for who you are in the world and together for co-hosting. I'm a quick study, soon to be Dr. Anthony, for this beautiful space of just giving us an opportunity to talk free will. So thank you, and I'm blessed to be here.
No, thank you. And we're going to jump into the questions, but so last time we shot, we had one of your former students, Dr. Travis Bristol. And before we jumped into the question, I asked him a very important question. So I asked him, Jay-Z or Nas? And Dr. Sealey-Ruiz, I'm not going to ask you that question because I know you're not from Brooklyn. You're from the South Bronx. So
You know,
my
I'm gonna
question.
say KRS-One.
You
Come
already.
on, you already
I
know.
was gonna ask KRS-One or Rakim, and you beat me to the punch.
Yes, yes, KRS-One. I mean, both of them.
Both of
There's
them.
so many, but KRS-One, no doubt.
Yeah, okay, okay. Well, I can roll with that. We love the teacher. And since you're a teacher, we're gonna jump into this first question. So question number one, you've described the archaeology of self as a process of excavation. What are we actually digging for, and what do people often resist uncovering?
Oh, thank you for that. There is a lot to resist when you do deep self work because if you're serious about it, you're going to tap some memories that cause harm, some memories that you've pushed down for years. And with those memories come these somatic feelings. And those feelings can often trigger anxiety, insecurity, different mental and somatic results that we don't want to experience. So that's the first thing, that it really is this mind body connection that people are not ready to go there. They've actually spent a lot of time either pretending it didn't happen or saying that they got over it. I think the other thing that people are not wanting to excavate is really seeing a different picture of themselves, right? We spend for those of us who know self-confidence comes at a hard pill. We spend a lot of time building up our self-confidence. I'm a good person. I'm a good person. And then when you start digging, it's not that you're not a good person, but you're a person that didn't do great things and you caused some harm. And particularly if you've caused harm to children, that's hard to reconcile. So when we talk about excavation, particularly around race, class, gender in the education space, people are afraid to accept that they've caused harm to others and they'd rather forget it. Yeah.
That's that's so huge. And I think about like the students you have who are future educators. Um, and maybe they haven't done any harm yet, quote unquote, right? But let's
Mm.
just say that they're kind of beyond this. They're in the classroom, right? Or they're principals of school. We were just talking about that. Or leaders in the district office, superintendents, wherever they might be, for educators and leaders who are just beginning this work. Because let's just call it out, like not every teacher preparation or administrative preparation program includes this, even though
Right.
it's in all the literature. But okay.
Yeah.
But what does it mean to start the dig? Because, you talked about, like, right, this dig we have to do within ourselves, and then how do we do that without becoming overwhelmed or defensive?
No, I was just, as we were talking before we went on, Tracy, Dr. Tracy, and you were telling us about being a principal and just kind of the physical nature of it. I'm going to start with the way you begin to dig is recognizing who you're serving, right? Because being a leader in a high school context, in a kindergarten, elementary, it's different, right? I mean, we're serving children everywhere, but when I say that, I mean developmentally, who are you serving? Racially, all the class, all of those things that make us unique and make our experiences beautiful. First and foremost, start there, and that is a very the ego cannot be driven by that, right? That is a space of vulnerability to say, I'm entering this dig on my leadership by looking at who I have been granted the opportunity to serve. That's the first thing. So, what does that community need? And how might you be able to give it? And if there are some things that are blocking you to be able to give that community what they need, that's the first place you begin. You begin to think about how do I then build up this particular skill, this particular way of being with these students so that I may properly lead them and to lead the students, excuse me, the teachers who are going to lead them as well. So, and I guess in that case, you can say it's contextual, right? That what is the context that I'm in and begin there. And once you can do that, because that's an act of vulnerability, I think you begin to start looking at your skills and your gaps in your skills. And that's another space to begin and to ask questions. Well, why do I have this gap in this particular skill? And that can lead you to what you need to excavate as well. It's deeply, deeply personal, deeply individual, but there are characteristics that leaders need to have if you're going to lead children, period. And if you're leading children of color, no doubt you have to do this work. Everybody has to, especially if you're leading children of color, even if you are a leader of color.
Yeah.
If you have to unpack all of that mess that you've been told about.
Yes. Yes. This this ability to reflect is so huge.
Mm,
And I feel like in my experience as well, it's like it's not innate, right? Like you actually
mm,
have to purposely someone has to purposely lead you through it. And then you have to have this commitment to going through the exercise
mhm,
and then committing to continually do that, right? So you talked about knowing the community you serve, and I think about this idea of, like, research, right? We never want to do research on, we want to do research with,
mm,
right? But and then there's this um when you think about leadership frameworks,
Mm.
everyone always gravitates to this idea of servant leadership.
Mhm.
Right? And I always say, like, there is this fine line between servant leadership and saviorism. And how do we avoid that, right? If we're not being able to be vulnerable, be self-reflective, and then truly know what your community needs. Because you have to
Hmm.
allow yourself to be in the community, right? You have to acknowledge that there's things that you don't know, right? You can't come in thinking this is the best for this community because hello, that's kind of what got us to this craziness that we're in, right?
Dr. Tracy, if this was like a game show, ding, 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 the balloons are falling from the sky, you hit the nail right on the head. And I think the way I have not been through leadership programs. I've taught within leadership programs. I was a leader in corporate America. I'm leading programs at TC. But one thing I do know is that they do not teach you humility.
Mm.
Because just inherent in the word leader is you being an expert, you being the person that everyone comes to, fake it till you make it type of stuff. And what you're talking about, which is really what we need in leaders if you're going to see the communities that you serve and they will see you, is humility, is critical reflection. That's not, to my knowledge, unless it's under a healing centered framework in leadership, unless it's under a culturally responsive leadership framework, for the most part, it's not taught. So therein lies the rub, right? Like we're training, I don't like to use the word training. Animals are trained, people are developed. We're developing leaders, and I think we're leaving out a major component, which is sometimes you have to put that ego to the side. You can still be an expert, but you don't have to show it every moment.
Yeah.
When are you going to learn from the communities that you're serving, the teachers who are working with you? There's so much to learn. The last thing I'll say is, introducing and me mentioning Travis as a former student. Travis is absolutely one of my teachers. Absolutely. I may have been blessed to be on his committee, working with him as he was beginning to emerge as a scholar in his writing. But there are so many things that he's taught me and continues to be my teacher. And that's what I want to stay in, that stance of humility, to be able to recognize that. I don't think that's taught in leadership programs.
Dr. Yoli, I have a question for you.
Mm.
Because you've just said so much and and it's like you just put a mirror up to me, right? So I was just really thinking about myself, right? And when I was in the classroom, specifically in middle school, and we all know the old adage, hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
And so what I found myself doing, in all transparency sometimes is as a black male teacher, inflicting the same wounds that were inflicted on me to my black male students, right?
Yes.
And I was thinking about everything that you were saying about the humility and all of those pieces, right? But my question for you more so leans on the forgiveness piece and the
Mm.
restorative justice piece, right? So on one hand, as classroom teachers, budding leaders, current leaders, specifically of color, how do we get to that place of forgiving ourselves for the pain that we inflicted? And then the other piece of that, I may never run back into those students who I may have harmed all those years ago.
Mm.
But what can that restorative justice look like moving forward?
Wow, what a beautiful question. And it's a layered answer, right? For those specifically people of color, Black folk, who may be religious. There's a difference between spirituality and religion, but who may be religious, then they already know some things about forgiveness. And what I would suggest, if that is part of who they are, then they would have to lean towards their religion around forgiveness and recognize that you must forgive yourself, period. There's no other way to move forward. Now, for those who are not religious or not even spiritual, I would then look to the work. I'm very influenced in this work by a lot of psychologists, right? From Black psychologists, Naeem Akbar, Joy DeGruy Leary, or Joy Leary. Um, in terms of a psychologist who's not a Black psychologist, but whose work is really important in this, I want to bring up Christian Neff, Neff. And what Christian Neff talks about specifically as we uncover our biases is that we have to have self-compassion. And she comes at this from like a neurological standpoint, right? Saying that the people that have been in her studies, those who are able to show self-compassion are actually able to move forward with working on unhinging from their biases and their racism. Those who are not able to forgive themselves, they're locked. I don't really want to use paralyzed because that's an ableist term, right? But they're locked almost in this loop and they can't break out of it, and therefore they don't try. And they remain kind of in this status quo. So what I would do at this point is you might have to go, I'm thinking you might have to go academic in a sense, that you may have to read something that you really understand what forgiveness and self-compassion does for your body somatically, but also neurologically for your brain, right? So if you don't have the religion, you don't have the spirituality, go to the academic, but find some place. Because if you're just sitting in guilt, that also can lock you into not making any changes. And we don't have time for people to not make changes. So you got to find your way. And if you don't know, ask somebody. Does that help, Anthony?
Well, that wasn't for me, but yes.
Well, let me ask you
No,
this.
yeah, no,
Have
absolutely.
you forgiven yourself?
It took me a long time, but yes, I did.
Yeah.
It took a lot of mirror work. Honestly, you know what it took, Dr. Yoli, and I know everyone doesn't have this privilege. It took me being the father to a Black son to really recognize it, right?
Yes.
So when I started looking at things through the lens of not just my parenting, but through the lens of how my son was being treated, particularly when there were any injustices, that put that mirror up in front of me really quick, right? But, yeah, it took a while, right? Because I think for a number of years, I lived in shame, right? And I walked around with this backpack full of grief, right? Grief to the grief that I had caused those students, right? So, um, yes, I have forgiven myself, but, it was a lot of work to do so.
No, Anthony, I'm so glad that you have gotten to that point. Such a beautiful relief for you and very freeing.
Yeah.
I'm also grateful that you mentioned mirror work, which is also very much deep in certainly mindfulness, but in psychology, shadow work. All of this language that you're referring to really is about healing.
Right.
And it's about healing the self. So, one other thing that I would add is people, leaders need to begin to really have a serious conversation about their own trauma.
Mm.
Connected, yes, to their work and to leadership, but just in their lives, manifesting from childhood. If you're going to be in this human professions, servicing other human beings, you have to really be serious about your own healing. I don't think there's any other way around it. And what I will say this, the last thing is the podcast that I did this morning was with Amy Elizabeth Fox, and she is one of the co-founders, along with her sister, of a company called Mobius. I don't know if you've heard of Mobius, Mobius Leadership. It's worldwide. I think it's international. It's definitely eminent, prominent, 20 something years. Anyway, she has this book, and I just have it right here actually, and I'm holding it up, called Leading in Chaos. But Amy's background in her 20s, she was studying under people like Carl Sagan, studying at St. John the Divine. So, kind of like a border of like religion, spirituality. And that really impacted the work that she does. So, she works with C suite CEOs, executive directors to unearth their own pain because she has seen how their pain manifests in the way that they lead others and how that is damaging. It's not just about capitalism, damaging to the bottom line, but you're damaging employees and souls. We have to stop this. And now more than ever, when we see all of the chaos, when are we going to say, let's do something different? Healing is the way. Also, love. That's a whole podcast.
Yes, absolutely. Healing and love, for sure. Two very much needed very much needed in this day and time, especially for ourselves. Um, I'm thinking about, this conversation about self-compassion and forgiveness, and I think it really does kind of lead to also this idea of resilience. And sometimes resilience is also related to like Yoso's framework, right? Of navigational capital.
Mm-hmm.
So there's different ways to maneuver through spaces that weren't necessarily made, right, for folks of color. And I think sometimes when we're navigating, right, that's where sometimes the harm is caused, whether it's to ourselves or to others. But I'm feeling like in this time, there's a lot of folks who are still doing this really great work, but they're not like super out in front with it, right? They're trying to be in these spaces where they're navigating. They're doing really great work, especially for the most marginalized in their communities, but they're silent in terms of, I guess, speaking up, right? Maybe their hands aren't up, or they're not saying things in the staff meeting anymore, or or at board meetings, or whatever the case might be. So what are your thoughts on how you define the difference between strategic silence, um, and silence that's harmful?
Mm-mm. Beautiful question. And I'm going to start with my grandmother. My grandmother used to say, the left hand doesn't always need to know what the right hand is doing. It took me decades to figure out what she meant until I went into noble silence and really saw myself as a justice worker, right? By the time I went into noble silence, I had already been doing this type of work. I mean, I remember going to protests, taking my daughter in a carriage, right? I have pictures of that, stop police brutality, all of that. And though that was important, and I still, every now and then, you'll see me on the protest line. But now that I'm in a different phase, my protests, sometimes I can give a little bit more money than what I used to have. So I fund the protests, I fund the people. I use my platform to speak up. So it looks different. If the silence is out of fear, then that is scary, almost even tragic. But if the silence is a strategy, like what my grandmother, right, and I'll give one example of how I think I'm doing this silent, but not so silent, then we also have to give the body and the central nervous system, I'm always going back to the somatics, an opportunity to regulate. If you're constantly out there, out there, out there, out there, out there, know that that is going to exact on the body. It's going to do something to the body. So this is why it's so important that we have the networks, that when one of us needs to tap out, that we tap in someone else. So that's also a strategy. And we know that that's grassroots. We know that civil rights movement, all of that. There is a difference between being silenced and accepting it out of fear than choosing the silence. I used to be very, very vocal at TC, even in the faculty meetings. We got, 160 people online, and I'll say to the president, you know how racist we are. When are we going to be honest about that? And it gets to a certain point that people are either going to tune in or tune out, but what is it doing for me? So what I've decided to do in all of this stuff, seeing how Columbia bent the knee, that's so disheartening. Um, but my dedication is still to my students and still to the work of racial literacy. So what I've decided to do is, let's say, for example, banned books. The racial literacy book series I'm doing, I'm making sure that I'm interviewing banned authors and making that public. So I'm not shouting to the out the rooftops, but what am I doing? I'm using the mechanisms, the vehicles that I have. I'm still public, and I'm just addressing something that I think is important. And I don't have to shout out in meetings anymore. I don't have to do things. Um, there's so much there that what you said to me, and I'm trying to hold back because there are things that I'm trying to heal from that was said to me publicly, in staff meetings. I'm just going along and doing my work. But I know one thing, I will not be silenced, nor will I silence myself out of fear. But I will choose when and how I speak And that is that's where I am. And I imagine other people are there too. I don't know if I answered the question.
Oh,
Mm.
that's super helpful. I mean, I think people take it for granted that we're in California, you know?
Or New York.
Yes, but there's forces at work here, right? There's forces at work that are choosing to cause fear, whether weaponizing the uniform complaint process or the California Public Records Act requests or the threat of lawsuits because, you're teaching something that folks don't agree with. Oh, it's all over the place, right?
We know it's not new, right? Anthony and Tracy, it's not new. It's part of the plan is to make people afraid and to silence them. And here's the thing: it's we can't really say blanket form. Oh, okay, that's who you always were. Some of that is true because when I saw how quickly people just like, oh, okay. But sometimes people do get afraid, and it's usually the ego for their own things that they're trying to protect,
Mm.
right? I don't want to lose my job. I can't lose my job. I don't want this person to be mad at me. I can't lose that friendship. So usually it's the ego involved. If we looked ancestrally, and I'm not romanticizing the 50s and the 60s because I know my ancestors had it hard, but they also understood the bigger picture. They also understood that they were putting something on the line that they might not even see. And I don't know that we still have that same spirit in part because our ancestors allowed us to get some of these comforts, that we thought, okay, this is what it means to arrive and be equally treated. No, no, this is no, no. First of all, we're already equal. It's that people choose for us not to see us as equal. That's on them, although it's very real consequences, right? So it's just so much that goes on in my mind when we're talking about this. But ultimately, that's where archaeology of self comes in, archaeologist, because ultimately you are going to decide what you're willing to put on the line and how it aligns with your values, how it aligns with you understanding that this is bigger than you.
I had to just sit with that. I couldn't just jump to say something. I had to sit with that. Yeah, that was good. Dr. Yoli, I've heard a lot of strategy in what you just said. Strategy. That's just what's ringing clear for me. Strategy. And last week, one of the strategies that you shared with us at the Equity Institute was to be water. Be water. Uh, but what really resonated with me is you said water can either be a tsunami or gentle raindrops. And I love that. So my question for you is, as leaders, how do we decide which form of leadership, is needed in a given moment?
Yeah, and I want to bring in Sister Dr. Tracy too on that because I know that you're a water sign. So I just want to see how that hits with you. But Brother Anthony is really what I think we were talking about. And I think we have to be fully present and attuned to the moment, to what's at stake for certainly ourselves, but for the communities that we're serving, since we're talking about leadership. I don't this is where the self-work really does come in, self-work, but also community. So I want to say as much as archaeology of the self is about this internal work, it is also it needs to be done in community. And that's why I mentioned water, legacy, and beloved community. For me, that is kind of a holy trinity in order to survive the things that we're in right now, right? Understanding the self. And what I mean by moving like water and deciding which water shows up, that is strategy. That is navigation. That is yoso. That is some of the other scholars, right? That is culturally relevant teaching, actually, for me, right? It's a type of water, if you will. You're going to make me think about some of these frameworks in relation to water. But if you're storming all the time, if you're a tsunami all the time, after a while, people are going to probably try to build a dam and try to keep you out. If you're always so gentle, gentle raindrops, people may not hear you. So you have to, like water, I think, be able to understand what is the context, what's at stake, and how you show up. How you show up. I no longer have to always show up as a tsunami. At the beginning, I did, and in many ways I still do, depending on the context. But I'm also in the spirit of this point in my life of I'm a peace seeker, right? And there's a way that you can do this work with peace and justice at the forefront and love at the forefront. This is my way, my path over doing this almost 30 years. So I don't know, I digress. But here's the thing, nothing is always the same way all the time. Why should we expect to be that? We're not robots. And so therefore our strategies cannot be robotic, because when they're robotic, people can figure you out. That goes back to grandma, left hand, right hand. So you must be fully present, understand who you're serving, know what's at stake, and then move accordingly. That's what I meant by that.
Let me ask you this too, because I've been thinking about this as well. So as leaders, how do we help to develop other leaders who have either been conditioned through, their lived experience, through I don't want to say training, I loved it, development, um, to not have that healthy balance, right? They have been conditioned to either be a tsunami or gentle raindrops. How can we call them in and help to support their growth?
Yeah, that's deep, because that's a decolonizing of the mind and a decolonizing of practices, right? We are so deeply embedded. I mean, for the 5, 10, 50,000 of us who are like conscious warriors, there's at least a million who are not, right? There are folks who, for all the reasons we said at the beginning, that will just go along with the status quo because it really requires too much at stake for themselves and as they've come to see themselves or the things that they've accumulated. So how we do it, I think, is inviting them into storytelling, our own storytelling, sharing with them what our journey was, being able to not always teach and preach, but to inquire, the inquiry method of asking questions. It's going to require patience. So that leader is going to have to determine, do you have the bandwidth? And again, what's at stake? Because maybe you need to find the bandwidth, but then how are you building those supports around you in order to pull that one leader along? Because that one leader can impact an entire school. There's a whole lot of souls in that school. Mhm. So I think the leader has to understand what is going to require of them as they do this conscious raising work, spirit raising work, soul raising work, because that's really what you're awakening. And you're asking folks to really decolonize their practice in their minds. And some of us are so tied to white supremacy and white ways of being and knowing, we don't even know where to begin. I think for some of us, we actually need like cleansing practices, almost like a deprogramming too, right? And then almost starting from scratch and pouring in indigenous and people of color ways of knowing from the jump. Yeah. Maybe we can open an academy, a decolonizing academy, and recruit people.
I'd love that. I'd love that for sure. But I just, for all the folks that are watching this and, in our and some of our former episodes, and there are leaders that have been through these processes, right? That have done the mirror work, the shadow work, that are are in their healing journey. I would just, I think I would say too, like those folks, especially if they, are principals or superintendents, the folks that are, I guess, out more in front, they have this opportunity to really be able to tell their stories and change this way of leadership, right? They have an opportunity to not only decolonize their ways of thinking, right? Change this idea of quote unquote professionalism or quote unquote leadership, right? Having it look like a very, you know, like white supremacy way of leading, um, into shared leadership,
Mm.
right? Into soft, vulnerable, right? Creating healing spaces, filled with love.
Mm.
Actually, that's one of the attributes in my my leadership praxis framework, ethics studies leadership praxis. the leaders that were in my study, they definitely work to create healing spaces all the time.
Mm.
Um, and I think it's just that. So, I just throw it out there for our viewers and our listeners, like, you, regardless of where you are in the space, you have an opportunity to share your story, to share your journey,
Mm.
to share your story of healing and decolonizing, and then, and where you're trying to go, and that, right, will cause the ripple effects.
Mm.
That's the ripples in the water.
I was about to come back to water because I wanted you to say something about it. But that really is the beauty of water, to be able to take shape at any time. Water never makes excuses for itself, it just flows. So, wherever you are, wherever you're flowing, and you know that this is something important to your heart and to your community, go into it. Enter where you can and just seek support and help. But Dr. Tracy, you are a water sign. Can you talk about your soon to be Dr. Anthony? This is coming for you too. Your relationship with water as you see it connected to leadership. Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm a water sign. I'm If you look at, well, I'm a Scorpio by, I guess, zodiac, right? And then, if you look at my Baza chart through traditional Chinese medicine, I'm heavy water,
Mm.
mm, which, again, tsunami to raindrops, what have you. Um, I think for me, well, "Be like water" is a quote by Bruce Lee that I actually have in the back of my head all the time, right? Be like water, because you never know what's gonna come at you. And so if I am free flowing, if I can take a shape, or if I can be like rapids, or a big, or a huge wave, or a little wave that, laps at the shore,
Mm.
those are the options that I know that are available to me. Um, I think that, coming from, the ethnic background of being Filipino, and having been born on the island of Guam, up until I moved to California, I was always in water.
Mm.
I was at the beach every day with my friends right after school, right? So water for me is comforting. It feels like home. So, you run from the sand into the water. It's very cleansing and soothing for me. So I think that, again, knowing that that's what helps to ground me in a way, right? Also helps to support my leadership. So when you brought up this metaphor of water, I was like, yes, yes, this is why we get along, because we understand we understand water.
Mm.
So there's
Mm.
just so
Mm.
many things, like you said, water can be gentle, water can be a force. Um, but when I think about strategy, right, I also think about, if this is the path, how am I going to go down this path, right? Am I going to, you know, um, create this big force where I just totally
Mm.
wipe out the path and then there is no path?
Mm.
Is it going to be like a running stream where I'm finding the little openings to where the water can flow, right?
Mm.
And along the way, like, you're enveloping and you're touching, right? You're touching everything that comes with it in a good way, right? In a good way. So you're lubricating and you're bringing them along, right? And so there's different there's different strategies, I think.
Can I say that's beautiful what you just said? Oh my gosh, I just want to pause. That was so profound and poetic, Dr. Tracy. And I'm glad this is recorded, because maybe you'll think of going back and doing something with that, all that just came out of you. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I had to just like
Oh, no, I appreciate it.
pause, and just the poetics in what you just said is undeniable.
Thank you. Thank you. But I think that's something that leaders need to think about too. My friend, Dr. Marvin Reed, he always asks folks, like, what's your leadership song? Right. So when you talk about speaking in lyrics. I'm like, "Oh, that's such a Marvin thing." Right? So, leaders have to figure out, like, what resonates with them. For me, it's water, right? You think lyrics.
Mm.
Anthony, what's your thing?
Yeah, talk to us, Anthony, about water. What's your thing?
You gotta have the Leo follow the water sign on talking about water.
Can I just
Uh,
say one thing? My daughter's a Scorpio. My sister's a Leo. So I'm just in great company right now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, water is my thing too. I don't know that I can say it as poetically as Dr. Noriega, but when I think about water as it relates to my leadership or leadership in general, I echo a lot of the things that she said, especially being able to take shape, right? Being
Mm,
able to adapt to different shapes in different situations. But when I think about water as well, I think about cleansing. I think about cleaning, right?
mm,
Uh,
mm,
especially in this work, we get dirty every day. Each day is rough. So I look at it through two lenses, right? I look at it like nothing beats a fresh shower after after a long day of doing
right.
equity work, but also the water represents the fresh, the newness, the freshness of each day, right? That
Mm,
we need to come in with a fresh mindset, a fresh approach to issues, right? Then
mm,
also think about water as healing. Tracie talked about, getting in the water culturally. When I think about water culturally, I don't just think about rain or, the ocean or, drinking water. I think about watermelon. And I think about how healing eating water is, right?
mm.
And as leaders, that's one of the things that we're tasked to do to heal. As educators
Yes.
specifically,
Yes. Oh, I
we're
got
healing
chills.
systems, we're healing babies, we're healing communities. And that's why we have this show, right? So water is very precious to me, right? And water is life.
It
That like
is.
or none over if you don't have water as humans, as plants, as anything,
3, 4 days, you're gone.
yeah, we can't survive, right? So water is survival. And when I think of this conversation as it relates to water, we're water together, right? Because
Mm.
like you said, we need that community. And I don't think we ever think about water as a community, right? We think of that as this big singular thing. But if you think about it, large bodies of water are communities joined together to create a force that can either build or destroy, and I think that's what we do as equity champions, equity warriors. We decide to destroy bad systems, erode those systems, and build up strong community.
My lord, I'm so glad this is recorded. I don't know. I would love for us to do something with this. I don't always want to rush in the academic sense. Oh, let's write something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I really do feel that number one, I'm so glad it's recorded and people will listen to it.
Right.
But to maybe have us think about how we can continue to think about water and to create something in written form
Mhm.
to share with people. Thank you both for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that. I love that visual of a community, right?
Oh,
Being this body of water. I love that.
yeah, there's this book. I forget the sister's name, a Latino sister, I think Afro Dominicana, and she wrote Community as Rebellion. Small little book. Read it, blew my mind. Community as water. Like, no, Anthony, that's dope.
Thank you.
Okay, finish your dissertation and
Yeah,
then
no, yeah, absolutely not. We will no, right, absolutely dissertation, but
Yeah.
Dr. Tracy and I will remember this. We'll have this as documentation.
Well, it's
We
documented
yeah, it's
in
documented.
the atmosphere now.
It's out there. And you know what TT Toni Morrison said? Once you put language to it, you give power to it.
Right. Right.
So, ashay for that.
Ashe.
Mm,
so, Dr. Yoli,
yes.
if a school or district wanted to embody this work, the archaeology of self, as a
Mm,
collective practice, right? Form a community around it.
mhm.
What would you recommend?
I'm glad you asked that because back in I'm looking over at my computer because I'm looking at the date. I think it was 2019. I wrote this piece for Nonprofit Quarterly talking about love as a way to like conduct business. And I talked about the archaeology of self. And literally, what I'm reading right now is one of the subheaders that says, implementing an archaeology of self program for your organization. So I've given this some thought, which is a beautiful thing. So thank you for that question. And at the time, and it may not be different, but I had 4 different approaches or steps for them to take just to begin. And the first step I said is number one, admit that you need it. So to establish it, say, you know what, in this district, we're going to have professional learning around self development, establishing the program, naming it, putting energy towards it, putting dollars toward it, and designating time for it. The second thing I said was as you do that, make sure that those spaces are brave and safe. Not all spaces we know are safe, and not everybody's willing to be brave. So that's the facilitator's job to make sure if we're going to say that, yes, we have this program, we're going to invite people to do this work, uncovering perhaps how the district has harmed me, how my principal in this building has harmed me without repercussions, all towards healing. You need a safe and a brave space for people to do that. The third thing I said was to provide storytelling workshops. And you can look at this as all part of one thing or maybe separate steps to get towards the actual program. But storytelling, as we all said, is central, it's key. It encourages empathy. You learn about people. You're able to see past the stereotypical ways of seeing that we often do. Because once you come to know someone's story or you can hear it, you now know something different about them. And if you're not a sociopath, you'll be able to like interact with them differently, right? And see something different. And then the fourth thing I said is, to actually have excavation exercises embedded in the way you do business or embedded in the way you do the work. So, what do the meetings look like? Are you coming together and just reporting, "Look, what's the data? What are the reading scores? Blah, blah, blah." Or are you coming together and actually doing some kind of maybe archaeology of your institution, archaeology of the people in the room? So even as I'm reading this now, the beauty of it is that it's all interrelated and you can parse it out. But first and foremost, I would say the first step is to say, we're actually going to use this language and we're going to focus what we do in this district on getting people to heal, on getting people to tell their stories, and there won't be repercussions. Now, you need some courageous and strong people to do that. And we know leaders that have done it. I've seen it.
Mhm.
Yeah. So and then I also in the same article talked about what you would do individually to do your own kind of archaeology of self program. And of course, no surprise, start with a journal and, start kind of talking to yourself in this way. So I have given this some thought. And if you don't mind, I'd like to share 2 things. You'll know the book, and thank you for allowing me to have preview samples. But the book, Archaeology of Self, The Introspective Educator's Guide to Racial Literacy, is intended as a love letter to teachers and leaders as well to do this kind of work. But, in it, because it's a somewhat academic text, but it also has like playlists, it has artwork, it has poetry. But I really want people to do what you're suggesting is how do you practice? So I'm now working on this archaeology of self playbook to really get people to play with these components of critical humility, critical reflection, historical literacy, and to do so through quotes of famous and not so famous people around the different components. So, for example, when I think about love, I think about Uncle Jimmy James Baldwin that says, love tells us to take off the mask that we know we cannot live within and we cannot live without. And once people do some writing exercises, I'm working with a holistic psychologist to do some somatic exercises. So I want them to do something with their body. I want them to do some writing. I want there to be a meditative practice. So I'm working on that now. How do you actually, and it's for 6 weeks. So it's a 6-week program. You have a quote a day around the 6 components. So it's very, organized in that way. And I'm just thinking a lot about people actually taking this up because racial literacy is not just a theory, it is a full on practice. And I'm inviting people into their racial literacy through critical humility, love, historical literacy, and so forth. So I've been giving a lot of thought to this, y'all.
I
Mm,
love it. Sign me
Thank
up.
you. And then we could do a program, right? Then the district can hire me and you, and we could do it all together, and then they can hire us to do it. And then we can just have the ripple effect.
Yes.
Mm.
And
Well,
shout out to the districts because there are a number of districts that have embarked on this work. I was really privileged to be in San Lorenzo Unified School District for 3 years as the assistant superintendent of educational services. And one of the things that drew me to the district was the racial equity work.
Mm.
Already very steeped in it before I got there and had this opportunity to take it and grow it. Um, and then I know that the district has expanded it, not just to teachers and classified, but to students as well. So
California is a model. I'm gonna be honest with y'all. I mean, and I'm thinking about what you said earlier. People think just because we're in California, liberal and so forth, but California for decades really has been a model around whether it's Berkeley campus or the Unified School District around equity and justice, which is why we know that when that person entered the White House, there were certain places that they were targeting education wise. California was one of them, making sure that money was taken away. And in Chicago, where changes are slowly trickling, taking away money because you're having Black student programs. But Cali is a model for us. And New York hasn't quite caught up yet. New York talks a lot. New York still has a lot of implementation to do. So, we're hopeful. We have a new mayor, we have a new chancellor. We love the new mayor. And we have people that are willing to continue to push to do this work. And we do have a foundation Asian American studies, Black studies, Latinidad studies. We have the foundation that we've been fighting for. It just hasn't fully made it into the system the way that we need it to be. But thank you, California. Seriously.
well, we're trying. We're
Mhm.
trying. Like I said, we have forces within. We had a landmark bill, Assembly Bill 101, that made ethnic studies a graduation requirement for the class of 2030. But somebody said that it needed ongoing funding. So supposedly it's paused. I don't believe that. So shout out again to all the districts that are still implementing, that have implemented
Yes,
ethnic studies
yes.
since the 70s, that continue to do it, that are really, really doing right by their families and such, and then doing this work. Because I was thinking about how in in schools we're teaching our little TK, pre-K, and our kindergarten students to talk about their feelings,
Mhm.
right? Somatic practices, but then instructionally, we haven't necessarily changed. So we just essentially gave them tools to regulate themselves when instruction isn't great, or they're harmed in a way. So I think that there's still dots that have to be connected, right?
Right. It's like
You
putting a fresh coat of paint over a wall that has all these plaster. It looks pretty, but the wall is still not prepared. I mean, like really repaired in the way that it needs to be. Yeah, I hear you.
yeah,
And we have to call it out. We have to love our systems enough. Like when James Baldwin talked about, I love America. And that is precisely why I will continue to critique her. I
exactly.
will continue because I know that there is the possibility of what she can become. And for those in California and you and Anthony, the critically conscious classroom, that's really what this is, right? We're not negating where we've come, but we also know it's a far way to go. And we have to have a critical mindset in order to get us to where we need to go. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Wow.
Dr. Yoli, I want to take it back to the book real quick. So, two questions.
Yes.
When and where can we find the book? Where can we buy it for everyone listening so that we can get them to buy the book? And you talked about this a bit, but I wanted to ask you directly, what inspired you to actually write this book?
Oh, thank you, brother. And let me start with the second first. And I wasn't planning on writing this. A piece I came out with, anything that I've written around archaeology itself, for the most part, has been an invitation that people have heard me speak it. As you see, I don't have a problem talking. And then they're like, "Do you have something written for that?" And I was like, "Gee, I need to start writing something." So I wrote that piece in English Journal, Archaeology of Self for Our Times, which pays homage to James Baldwin and his 1963 A Talk to Teachers. And I lift up some of my homies. Well, Gloria Ladson Billings is not my homie, but Bettina Love is my homie. Gloria Ladson Billings is a mentor, Chris Emden and so forth, Goldie Muhammad. But then about a year ago, Paul Gorski said, "Hey, Yoli, would you like to write a book on archaeology of self?" And I said, "No, not really." He said, "You can do poetry." I said, "Bet." So as soon as he told me that it could be, because it's with Routledge, and that I could have like creativity involved, I said yes. And I'm glad you asked me because I didn't necessarily have it in me. I went back to podcasts that I had been doing over the past 10 years talking about archaeology of self. I downloaded all of everything that I said, all the podcasts. I removed the guest or whoever I was in conversation with, and I was left with 196 single space pages of me talking about archaeology of self. And that's where I started. And then I put on my qualitative research hat. I started looking for themes. I started bracketing, doing bucket work, and the rest is history. So I was invited to do it. I'm glad I did it. The book took a lot out of me because I am really trying to give a lot in this book. It will likely be my last academic book. It's my first single authored book. So it's a big thing for me. I want it to be international. I want people from all walks of life to read it. And it's hitting bookstores or anywhere you find books June 29th. And I'm excited about it.
We are too.
Yeah.
We are too.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, we're so glad that your little booklets came out and our attendees at the conference were able to get that. We'll make sure that folks have this link as well,
Thank you.
so that they can, pre-order your book.
Thank you. That'd be beautiful. And I'll be in California a few times. I'll let y'all know when I'm coming out to, as Travis calls it, the left coast. I'll come out, and I like that. The left coast. And maybe we'll have dinner, we can get together, we can gather some teachers and just have a conversation about healing. So that's ultimately what I want people to do. I want people to heal.
Let's do that. Let's absolutely do that. Anthony and I would love to host you, gather some folks together, and yes, and then have a book talk.
I'll
But we'll
let
see
you
each
know.
other next week at
We will at AERA.
Anthony will be there too, right? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
The vortex that is AERA. Are we ready?
Well, there's the non-era talk
Oh,
too.
yeah. Oh, the un-AERA?
Un-era.
Oh, can I tell you, true story, that I'm part of the initiator of that? Back in 2012, with Ivory Tosin, who's a mentor, Chance Lewis, who's a mentor, we started this kind of conversation with Ivory's work, Breaking Barriers, which is really focusing on Black boys, Latino boys. And we did that for about 2 years in a row, and it evolved into on AERA. And I'm excited that Bettina Love is speaking. And I would have been introducing her, except I'll be doing the Tiny Desk concert in music with Sean Harper and some other folks. I know AURA got to get better because you can't be putting these things together. So, but anyway, I'm excited. But thank you for bringing that up. True story. So happy to have been part of that planning team. Although really it was Ivory Tolson, but Chance Ivory and I came together knowing that we needed a different space at AERA.
Last year was my first ERA conference, in Denver, right? We were in Denver.
Did you
And
enjoy it?
yes, and then, I also got to go to the BIPOC Scholars Party.
Oh, there's some good parties. Listen, Black and Brown Party.
The
Come on.
Black and Brown Party, yes. That
Listen,
was
Anthony, you gonna be there? Are you coming?
I'm there. I'm there. I'm in the building.
Listen, I'll send you the invite. I think I have the invite of if you don't have the information, I'll send it to you. And one last thing, I don't know if this is on our recording or not, but I'd like to send to you, Sister Dr. Tracie, a Mother Scholars event held by Cheryl Matias, as you know, she's probably a beautiful sister friend of yours.
Yeah, I know
Uh,
Cheryl. Mhm.
okay, there's a gathering though of Mother Scholars, specifically Filipino Mother Scholars. So I'll just send that to you if there's something else that you want to go to. So,
Sounds good, sounds good. All right, Dr. Yoli. Well, Anthony, do you have any other questions, or is
No,
this the
no,
last?
that is the last one.
Okay. All right. So, if you could leave educators and leaders with one question they should continue to ask themselves long after this conversation, what would it be and why?
mm, who are you? And to ask it in succession. Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you is what I would like them to know.
Wow.
So simple yet so deep. So
For
simple.
real.
Yeah. Who
For
are you?
real.
Takes a lot of work to get to that answer, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does. All
Mm,
right. Well, family, the question is, who are you? This has been an amazing episode, as we assumed it would be. So very excited to be in space with you again. For those of you all who are listening to us, watching us on YouTube, wherever you're finding us, few quick things. So the 2026 Equity Institute will be available sometime soon on the ACSA Online Learning Center. We have all of the keynotes recorded. We have all of the sessions recorded. So be looking out for that. As Dr. Noriega and Dr. Yoli have told us, we will be in LA next week at Era or Unera or wherever you'll catch us, pull up on us if you're in LA. Um, and I think that's it for now. I don't think I have anything else to drop in people's lap other than we appreciate you all as always. We love you, we thank you, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Peace.
Peace.